Awesome. All right, so we're going to hop into the virtual experience Georgetown featuring the Flex MBA online. Now, you may want to know what sets us apart. Well, pretty much our mission, is to develop principal leaders with a global mindset to be in service to business and society. So, how do we support this mission? First, we prepare students to be global ready and do this through multiple ways. The classrooms, where our students represent about 50 plus countries, and 84% of the most recent class of MBA students have lived, worked, or studied abroad. Now, the classroom conversation will be global by virtue of who is in it. One of the first classes that you will take will be the structure of global industries, which will set the stage for the rest of your program. In it, you'll be working in small groups to set up your own multinational business with a global supply chain and pose with timely crises that you'll have to flexibly navigate. All students will consult for an international client in another country over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, with the final week in country. You will also have the opportunity to travel internationally over each fall or spring on a student led trek, whether it be you're volunteering in Bogota, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, or meeting prospective employers in London. Now, we are global at home in Washington, D.C., by the nature of being in a global city. This naturally translates into our second pillar, which is our location in Washington, D.C. The access. Wow. The access to speakers who come to campus, like presidents from Washington to Obama, have addressed Georgetown students. Employers can easily come to campus, and you don't want to have to constantly pay to train or fly or meet employers. But the thing is, even though with the online MBA, you have that access. So when you come to DC, and employers come in person, and there's also a virtual aspect to that as well, if you're not able to make it to DC. Also, during the executive challenge in your first year, of the program, thinking about, all the alumni that actually comes to campus and just knowing that you have those access. And then also leading, into obviously not our last, the last pillar, but not the least, which is principal leadership. Now, this ties into our Jesuit background dating back to 1789, the same year the Constitution was signed. And in fact, Georgetown is the oldest Jesuit university in the US, founded with strong values, men and women in service to business and society. Now you'll see this commitment to social impact and service woven throughout MBA experience from the alumni that continue to support the students throughout an ethos of Hoyas helping Hoyas to holistic support from our career services to ensure that recruitment is tailored and personalized to the individual experience. The Jesuit tradition also focuses on teaching, hiring good teachers, not just researchers. A lot of the faculty have an open door policy and regularly are available to be of support through all aspects of the program. Now, leveraging the location in DC. Even though you're virtual, you have the access and the opportunity. One of the most global cities in the world. Now, among large metropolitan areas, DC has the highest concentration of Fortune 500 companies. Business relationships and networking are ways of life in DC. There are professional association events and networking events happening constantly, allowing you to get involved both at Georgetown and in DC. The DMV has a strong concentration of corporate HQs, headquarters for companies like Fannie Mae, Capital One, Hilton, Marriott, Amazon, and Nestle. And DC is ranked number 6 on America's best cities for professionals in Forbes. DC ranks number 1 for world's top entrepreneurial hub as per the Global Cities Talent Competitiveness Index. Also is bike friendly, of course, and metro accessible, and you get to access so many different cultures and great restaurants. So it's really a great place. All right, so this is talking a little bit about the schedule, the curriculum, for the Flex MBA online. Now, Georgetown McDonough believes in asynchronous learning where you can engage with your professors and peers in live course sessions, incorporating a mix of synchronous and asynchronous course content that is best suited to the various classes and course topics to maximize your learning. Some courses will be half synchronous and half asynchronous, allowing both the flexibility and rich learning experiences. All courses, except for in-person residencies and optional intensive learning experiences, are held Monday through Thursday during 6:30 to 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For courses that include a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, the synchronous component of the class will either be the first half of that course or the second half. Most likely, it's going to be on Mondays and Wednesdays from 8 to 9:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, please note that the Flex MBA Online program is strictly for students who reside in time zones that are plus or minus 3 hours of Eastern Standard Time. The MBA curriculum is composed of 31.5 credits of required core courses and 22.5 credits of electives, including the intensive learning experiences, which you can also call ILEs. Semesters include 12 weeks of class plus midterm and final exam periods. Half semesters or modules include 6 weeks of class plus a final exam period. Beginning the second semester, you are able to customize your academic experience by selecting electives, choosing from a limited number of online modular and intensive learning experience electives. Students will have the ability to choose from a curated list of online electives while having access to join other MBA students on campus electives due to space available basis. Now, FXO students will have the choice of up to about 3 electives per module. If certificates are asked, and if you're, kind of wondering about the certificate side of it, because we do have MBA certificates, but you're able to get an MBA certificate if you're able to come in person. So that fits into those electives that you're able to do in person. Now, thinking about the global business experience. So it is required for all of the Georgetown McDonough MBA students. Now, students partner with executives from multinational organizations to address complex business challenges. Since its inception, 5,000 students have worked on over 900 projects in 27 cities across 5 continents. Some recent locations are Accra, Ho Chi Minh City, Singapore, Berlin, Madrid, Seoul, and Sao Paulo. The GBE opportunity, this is where you will spend a week during a course in country. And it's not the final week of the course, it's a semester long, but just thinking about the 6 to 8 weeks, you will also have the opportunity to pursue various projects in one country with your cohort. So thinking about this in one country, but you'll have access to multiple projects. Now here I'm highlighting the flexibility of an online MBA like student schedule. Yes, it may look a little chaotic, but if you think about it, you are a working professional. You are going back to school, continuing your education. So you do have a daily life. And this is just a sample of a schedule of an online MBA student, thinking about the MBA consulting project meeting that falls on a Sunday. Thinking about when you wake up in the morning, if you have a family, starting with school drop off, and then you have to actually start your job. And then also fitting in those other needs of, what your schedule could look like. Some of those class times, thinking about when projects are due. You're going to add those things on your calendar. And it may look chaotic, but it's definitely going to keep you balanced. With the McDonough Career Center, you'll have many opportunities for you to establish your personalized career plan. You will interact with alumni and key players in business and discover your targeted functions, industries, and companies. Now, the summer webinar series is the first portion of the job search course and it is taken with the incoming full-time class. Beginning the summer before you arrive, the summer webinar series consists of 3 webinars detailing the creation of 3 deliverables that serve as the beginning of your career marketing portfolio. The job search course begins the January of the second semester of your first year. The topics covered include job search communication, networking, interviewing, and understanding all the resources at your disposal via the McDonough Career Center. The course continues on with 1 installment each semester so that Flex students can partake in formal post-MBA recruitment during your 3rd or final year. You'll have regular coaching appointments that'll be available throughout the remainder of your program. Evening appointment hours are available after the first job search course. And to maximize the benefit of your degree, we provide career advancement workshops to help students understand your strengths, identify strategic opportunities, develop emotional intelligence, and enhance your executive presence. You'll have access to numerous workshops, programs, and alumni speakers to reinforce that you're content and provide real-time job search situations and feedback. Workshops and programs including mock interview days, career fair prep boot camp, offer negotiations workshop. Now, to build upon your learning from the summer webinar series, our team of dedicated certified career coaches are available to help you shape your individual career strategy. The career coaches, peer advisors, and student organizations collaborate to cultivate career opportunities that are industry and function specific. The career coaches will coach you through the job search process, also manage the relationships with the alumni and recruiters in their respective industries. Also, students have worldwide alumni network access, 200K plus Georgetown alumni, 30K plus McDonough alumni. Our alumni are found in 78 different industries at some of the top firms in the world. Alumni help with everything from recruiting students to hiring and mentoring MBA students. Community life. This is a governing board when you're thinking about the SGA portion of it. Now, this is a governing board elective students that represent the interests and initiatives of the online student body. They strive to continuously improve the McDonough School of Business community, enhance the overall experience for students, and maximize the value of the McDonough School of Business brand. Student organizations start building connections and networking with your class members before the fall. If you ask many students one word that describes Georgetown, they'll say community. Getting involved in a student organization is also a great way to network with companies. So think of them more as professional associations. There are more than 40 student-run organizations at MSB that span from cultural, service, recreational, student government, and interest-based communities. Our student clubs enhance and integrate your academic, social, and professional lives and attest to our culture of community. Now, you may be thinking, who we admit into our MBA programs? Of course, you would visit our website, look at those class profile stats. Of course, being smart, polished, global mindset, and having a generosity spirit, grit, Georgetown interest, and engagement. As you'll hear from many other schools, we look at your academic, professional, and personal background in a holistic background to determine your fit for the classroom. Each school will have an average and range of the GMAT, GPA, and years of work experience. You ideally will fall near the averages, but within the ranges. But I know some of you may have questions about the application components, and we will definitely have a brief Q&A after this. And I will also be sharing my email. So if you'd like to have one-on-one conversations or have more personal questions, I'm definitely happy to get those answers. So I'll drop my contact in the chat after this, and then we'll open it up for a brief Q&A before we move into the next portion of this programming. All right, and staying connected with us. And I'll leave that there for a second. Gaining more information, connecting with student ambassadors, requesting more information, and attending more events, I think is really helpful when you're, doing your research for an MBA program. This is a life-changing thing to do. You're dedicating time, and you are taking the time to grow further in your career, whether it's pivoting or advancing where you are. Next up, I'm going to, and before we hop into the Q&A, I'm going to share a quick virtual tour of the Hariri building. If you've never been to the Hilltop, or if you've never been to the Hariri building, this is a quick glance at the building itself, but then just also knowing that you can always visit us throughout the week whenever you're visiting in the city, or if you are local and you are just a ways from the city, you can always stop in throughout the week. Now let's take a look.
business classes. We're looking forward to welcoming you. This is the first floor of Hariri, but this is mainly where first years hang out as well as have classes, so we'll head up to the second and third floor. Hi everyone, you can see here we're at the Career Center. Every student at McDonough is assigned a career coach based on your industry, and they'll help you with not only finding a full-time role, but also your internship. Second year peer advisors also work out of this office, and they will assist you with case studies and mock interviews for your upcoming internship interviews. We have breakout rooms that you can go into to also practice your mock interviews as well as case studies. Hi everyone, this is Lorfink Auditorium. This is where your orientation will be held, as well as any large events that involve the entire class. For example, things such as international fests, pitch competitions, as well as alumni speakers. So you're one of the main classrooms that you'll be in, particularly in your first year. In your first year, you're assigned to a cohort, which is about 60 students. Our full-time cohorts consist of Blue, Gray, Hoya, as well as Saxa. I'm proud to say that I'm in the Gray cohort. Within your cohorts, it's broken down even further into study teams, which typically consist of 6 or 7 people. The program office puts those together so you don't have to worry about it. It usually provides a diverse mix of people so that you can play off of each other's strengths. You'll have 3 different study teams, one for opening term, one for the full first semester, and then you'll switch it up in the second semester. In this classroom, you may also have electives, but you may also have them in smaller classrooms throughout the building. Electives tend to make up some of your second semester and then most of your second year, and you can tailor that to your interests. Hi everyone, here you see that we're outside of Fisher. A lot of large student panels as well as alumni speakers take place here, in addition to KEGS, which stands for Keeping Everyone at Georgetown Social. It happens every Thursday, and we actually have real kegs. But no worries if you don't drink. We also have water as well as snacks, and it's just an opportunity for students to come together and engage. We're located above the 2 floors that we've shown before, so we're at our highest level with the beautiful campus behind us. We'll get some photos of that a little later, and we're also going to look at some breakout rooms after this. Bye everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the virtual tour. We can't wait to see you all on campus. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to student ambassadors on Unibuddy. Thank you. Hoya Saxa.
Awesome. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I didn't see any messages that you couldn't hear the video, so I hope you were able to hear it along with seeing it. Awesome. So I can definitely open it up for a brief Q&A before we transition into our student experience panel. And just looking at the group, if you wanted to come off mute, you can, or you can just drop it in the chat. We will be hopping into the student panel in about 4 minutes. So I would love to take this time to answer any questions you have about the application process or getting connected with student ambassadors or the campus itself, or even if it's something I don't know, you could just shoot your question out there and I'll do my best to get that question answered for you. No questions so far. Awesome. Well, that means, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I'm definitely happy that we are here this evening and we have this platform to get those questions answered that are top of mind. But we can definitely move forward and transition if we are ready to do so. Let's see. Do we have our hi Elizabeth, one of our FXO students?
Hi, how's
Hi
it going?
Elizabeth. I'm awesome. Thank you for joining this evening. I know that we have to hop into a student panel and just, I guess, kind of give some insight to what it's like to being an FXO student. Um, Definitely happy to do so. Now, let's see. And just thinking about it, Elizabeth, I wanted to kind of give the audience just some insight about you. Introduce yourself and letting them know, like, when you are graduated, when you are aiming to graduate. Because I know, like, with the Flex program, you have some time to kind of be flexible and kind of complete your program in like the average 3 year, or thinking about up to that 5 year. And also, telling about your time so far in the program.
Absolutely. So my name is Elizabeth Tafoya. I'm a first year student and I actually reside in Cape Canaveral, Florida. So I'm a bit far from the DC area. The reason I decided to go to Georgetown was for a few different reasons. But one of them was I love DC and I currently work in the private aerospace industry. So my job just requires me to be down here in Florida. But I figured, I love the campus, I love Georgetown, so what better way to get involved with DC than to go to Georgetown? I'm also really looking forward to the Global Experience Program. There's a few residencies that, if you don't know already, we can tell you about that later, but the local residencies that Georgetown offers. So I've already got to campus once, and I get to go again this upcoming fall.
Nice.
Um, yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I plan on graduating in 2027. I do like the flexibility though, because with my job, we have really busy seasons. And so this semester I'm actually taking quite a light course load compared to last semester. So it was great to talk to my program officer to understand, does that impact my graduation date? If so,
Right.
how? And just like have that dialogue with her.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And just kind of get some clarity there. But thank you for sharing that and then thinking about because this is your first year.
Yes.
Yep, so that's awesome. And how did you, and thinking about the first residency, how did you kind of maximize your time when it came to like networking with your cohort?
Yeah. So we actually all stayed at like the same hotel, like Georgetown put us all up at the same hotel. And so we had breakfast together, and that was just kind of like by happenstance. Like I didn't expect to do that, but I would go down to the lobby a little bit early and all the students would be there. So we'd mix and mingle there. We'd walk to the bus stop together, we'd grab lunch together. So we were actually in the same environment quite a bit. So it gave us a really good opportunity to like talk to each other and understand where each other is traveling from, and what our different backgrounds are.
Awesome. And Solomon, thank you for joining us. This Solomon is a current FXO student. Thank you so much, Solomon, for joining. And I'm going to pass it over to Elizabeth and Solomon, for them to continue to share their experience about the program so far. And then you'll still have some opportunities to ask questions in the chat too, and then we'll get your questions answered. I'll be answering questions in the chat while they're having a conversation, and then they'll also be able to answer some questions for you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much. So I introduced myself, Solomon. Can you just introduce yourself and let the group know your background, why Georgetown and what year you are in school?
Yeah, of course. Hey everyone, apologies for being a little late there. But yeah, Solomon McCray here. I'm an FXO 26 student, so got about one more year. My background is in consulting, so doing federal consulting right now. And so what led me though to choose Georgetown is that it had so many different opportunities for potentially changing my career path if I ever thought. I knew I didn't want to be specifically quote unquote pigeonholed within a specific, sector. So felt like the opportunities presented at Georgetown would allow me to go into something that maybe, let's just say, for example, healthcare related or investment banking or, IT strategy, whatever it may be, it has that here. So that was one of the biggest reasons to why I wanted to do in Georgetown.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
So one question I have is I have a list of questions, but what surprised you most about the program once you started?
So yes, for me, I would say just the depth and breadth of the people that you'll meet. So I was under the impression that you'd be with, let's just say, I'm more or less like business school grads, but the thing is that you'll be with people who could have just graduated, so very young, may have not even started to their career, to folks who are going to be well into their career, who may be 40. So getting that mix of folks allows you to see so many different perspectives, whether it's from learning from the new folks who just graduate from undergrad, along with the folks who have been tenured and have been around the block for a little bit. So that was, in my opinion, I wouldn't necessarily say the biggest shock, but one of the things that I found super interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. So we're Solomon and I were in different classes and different cohorts, but I definitely relate on everything you said. Same with my class. I think the thing that surprised me the most was the real world application. We had a management class in the fall, and I'm an individual contributor in my profession right now, but interested in management. And one of the like lessons we went over was how to give feedback. And I found that extremely beneficial to be taught how to give feedback and how to receive feedback. So it's something that I'm excited that I can actually take that into my career and apply it. All right. So how did you navigate the balance between work, school, and your personal life? Do you wish you did anything differently?
Yes. So the one thing that, and I said this, I think that we had another one last week, and this is the biggest thing is, time management. If you aren't a time manager, then I highly recommend becoming a time manager. If you're working, you get the calendar invites on your, calendar. Take that same approach to your personal life with trying to manage everything. I can't stress enough how just being organized on when certain things are due, carving out even time for yourself. If you look at your calendar and you see, hey, there's a bunch of school stuff, make sure you prioritize your self-care too as well. So time management, I think, has been the biggest thing. And so I would say I'd spend about an hour a day trying to do schoolwork by spreading it out. So um obviously around finals time it may get a little bit more intense, but I would say generally about an hour to 2 hours a day for schoolwork.
Yeah, time management is huge. That was a learning curve for me as well. I think something that I was a big thing for me was understanding that I need to have grace with myself and be patient with myself because, like most, this is the first time I'm going back to school in quite a few years. So giving myself a moment to catch up with the learning curve, to understand that this is not my normal routine and that my personal life might look a little bit different. And setting that expectation with my company and my leadership there to let them know, hey, I've got some obligations, I can't stay late because I need to take care of this schoolwork. So definitely that expectation setting was something that surprised me the most that I wasn't expecting to do, but definitely something that I had to catch up with quick. All
And the
right.
one thing I'll just add to, at least from like the group project perspective too, is that everyone's working, everyone has lives. So one of the things I also found super helpful was creating, excuse me, a group chat, or let's just say, I think we're using WhatsApp. So creating that, group chat to where you can communicate and understand, hey, I'll be busy, most days at 5, after you get kids, or hey, I won't be busy tonight, I have I don't know, yoga, whatever it may be. So just being able to communicate and set those expectations early with your group into when you can and can't meet is definitely one of the things I would recommend too as well.
Absolutely. That's actually a good point. I think that I saw that mostly in my last team meeting. So we actually had a team member on my team who just had a baby and welcomed a baby into their family. And so that was like a big life change. And they definitely let us know. And I think everybody is so understanding of everybody's different life circumstances. There's some time zone differences, there's some obligation differences. And everybody's very patient with each other. So I think that's huge and just definitely communicate, like Solomon said, communicating your availability and kind of what maybe your circumstance looks like. All right. Um, how would you describe the school's learning culture? Is it competitive or collaborative?
Great question. I definitely am going to say it's collaborative. there may be this, connotation to where everyone's kind of competing, but in actuality, I think it's extremely collaborative. I mean, we have our group work. I mean, in the real world, you're collaborating with your team, whether you're working on a cross-functional team or just within your current team. So really trying to, give that experience of working with a team here. So definitely would say it's collaborative and not as headbutting per se, for lack of a better word. So.
No, I'd agree. I think I was expecting a competitive environment, and it was quite the opposite. I think there's so many people who come from so many different backgrounds, and everybody's skill sets are so different that I felt like when my team came together, there was one person who was great at this and another person who was great at that. So I feel like instead of, like you said, competing against each other, it's how can we utilize each other's skills and learn from each other. So gaining a realistic expectation of life as an online MBA student. I know you touched on it a little bit, Solomon, but how much time do you invest outside of class on readings, group projects, homework, and all the other coursework?
Yes, yeah. So again, I would say still about 1 hour to 2 hours. And I know I kind of already said it, but again, it's manageable. The faculty ensures that it's a manageable workload because again, like Elizabeth had just said, some folks who just had their first kid. For him, an example, I actually just had my first daughter. So, adjusting to that, schoolwork, work and then also your personal life. So they definitely keep in mind and ensure that you're learning, what is the core thing that you're trying to learn here. I wouldn't say it's not necessarily like undergrad where I felt like you could get lost in the details of things, but more trying to understand, I guess you could say like the big picture. And then how can that be applied to the real world rather than trying to focus on, firm ABC does this, we're now saying, Toyota does this, or, um, whatever, maybe Ford does this. So that's definitely one of the things I would say.
Absolutely. And I think I, just like you, about an hour a day. Sometimes it's more if they're like we're in the thick of a group project or if finals are coming up. Sometimes it's more there. And there's definitely some courses that offer optional readings that will only, enhance your understanding of the content. But I've definitely found that you don't have to do those optional readings for those weeks where you are just like slammed. You're running from family to work to school. There's a lot going on definitely as an online MBA student, but they make it very like accessible. So if you don't have time to do all the optional readings, like you're not going to get left behind, and everybody's very helpful. So I would say about an hour a day, but sometimes more if I feel like I need to go to office hours or have longer group discussions. All right. How often do you interact with your professors outside the classroom? Do you find the professors innovative in how you can connect with them as far as virtual versus in person?
Yes. So I would say I'm someone who's probably a little bit more or less on the spectrum of constant interaction with professors outside of the class. I have had interactions with professors outside of class whenever I had to reach out for, let's just say, a question or wanted to get thoughts on something. And with those interactions, they're extremely responsive. All the professors provide, office hours weekly and ensure that it's at, appropriate time to where folks can make it. It's not going to be at 1:30 on a Tuesday afternoon where it could conflict with work. So, they're very understanding of people's schedules and willing to meet with folks and provide that extra help where needed. And as for how they kind of deliver the material, I would say it's very innovative and applicable again towards real life problems. So whether you may or may not be, let's just say, trying to optimize the production of something, um, they'd actually frame it to where, okay, you're actually going to buy a house. So trying to make it so whether it may directly apply to your work or not, you could still connect to it through like real life events of buying a house or buying a car.
Definitely. And I would say the same. I'm not too, I don't connect with the professors too often, but when I do need office hours or, an appointment, everybody is very available. And I think I see some message in the chat. So we'll definitely come back to your questions. So definitely keep asking them. We'll make our way back. But I feel like, they're available to you. I went to my undergraduate degree at a really big state university, And I remember it was a little bit harder to connect with professors just because of, I had 500 person undergraduate classes, and the cohort is much smaller. And so I find that the professors are definitely more accessible. And so if I'm ever like, hey, I'm struggling with, this material, I get a response almost instantly, offering me a few different times that the professors are available to meet. So it's really helpful for me to just jump on a call. A lot of them also offer to stick around after class, so that they always say, hey, stick around after class, we will go over more questions. And so sometimes I'll just listen in to see what other students are asking. But I think it's a great way that it's not just like, okay, class is over, see you. It's like, okay, no, we can actually continue this discussion, or you can ask further questions. All right. What activities are you involved with outside of class, and why did you choose them?
Yes. So I've been involved in a lot of and I forgot the name of the org they put it on, but a lot of the student events that we have. So for example, we've had student events at Nats Park. I myself am a huge Nats fan, so have gone to those. There's been the Christmas party that we've had at what's it called again? It's one of the places in Navy Yard. I'm blanking on it. But then there's also like the grad gala too as well. So there's plenty of events that you can go to build those connections with folks. But then there's also certain activities too as well. There's like a venture capitalist club. One of the things that I plan on trying to do, there's an investment banking club. So there's a lot of different consulting club too as well. So there's a lot of different, clubs out there for folks to join. Again, I myself have primarily just been engaged in kind of more of the social activity pieces, but do want to join that venture capitalist club or IB club. In the rare case, I try to navigate out of the federal consulting space.
Yeah, no, those social events definitely sound like fun. So, I'm actually, I think I mentioned it earlier, I'm in Cape Canaveral, Florida, so I'm a bit far from the DC campus. So I'm involved in a few different ways. So I'm in the Graduate Women in Business Club. That's always a fun one. There's always events that I see going on there. And it's a great way to, feel more connected to my classmates. And then I'm also a student ambassador. And the reason I joined that organization was I wanted a way to connect with other students from Florida and feel like I'm involved on campus. And becoming a student ambassador is a great way to do that. And I work with, I think it's 12 other students, along with the program staff. And I feel like I get to know everybody and still keep up on what's going on campus and stay up to date with the times. So I've had fun with it so far. All right, if you could go back to the start of your program, what advice would you give yourself as an incoming MBA student?
Yes. So, I know I've already kind of mentioned it, and it was the time management piece. Um, I think you just naturally realize that your life will become easier when you do that. But I would say that and um ensuring that I guess I would definitely say I'm still doing, but even, doing it more would just be ensuring that you're connecting with, everyone as much as possible, just to build those connections. Because again, you never know when you may want to reach out to someone for whether that may be, a recommendation, get their thoughts on something. So building those connections, just because, like I said, you never know when you may need them and you may learn something. So that's definitely one of the things I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with those points. Like the time management one is huge. So if you can definitely get that ingrained now, it's a good thing to get a head start on. I think for me, the advice that I would give myself, I remember having a bit of imposter syndrome. I remember thinking, oh gosh, I haven't been back to school. I haven't taken a test in how many years. And once I got into, the program and got to know my peers, it took a lot of the pressure off. And I remember wondering like why did I get so hard on myself and get down on myself for having imposter syndrome? Because everybody's in the same boat, whether, it's 1 year, 2 year, people have been out of school, or maybe it's 10 or 15 years that people have been out of school. We're all kind of in that same boat, and we're all learning how to get back in the groove of the coursework. So that was mine. And have you developed relationships with alumni during your time at McDonough?
Yes, I have. So funny enough, when as soon as you joined, I started to learn about more folks who had gone to McDonough while at the program. And so, although we work at the same company, it just allowed me to open up that door, even more to approach them. Because again, if you're working at someone at the same company, you may not necessarily just randomly go up and just, talk to every random person, but once you establish that connection, like, hey, we both went there, it made it a little bit easier to approach them. And come to find out, this individual was, one of the leaders, at the firm. So, it just made it a lot easier to connect with them. And then, also one of the reasons to actually why I ended up going, or choosing Georgetown was because I had former colleagues who had started the program before me. So still just, keeping those connections alive and leveraging them to the best of my ability to, just gather information and pick their brain for, whatever I may try and, accomplish next.
Yeah, that's awesome that you work with fellow alumni. That's awesome. I don't think there's any at my company yet, but we'll get there. I haven't connected with any alumni quite yet, but I know that the network is huge, and I've talked to a lot of other students who have. And knowing that they're there for us is huge. Like knowing that if I ever kind of wanted to explore a different job field or want to learn something new, that we have that alumni network to, call upon is just helpful. So I'm excited to eventually connect with the alumni. And then what advice do you have? I know we've talked about advice a few different times, but what advice do you have for incoming MBA students or those still considering applying?
Yes. I will reiterate it. Um, Time management, but then also it's an awesome experience. I mean, just from the, content that you do learn and how it's applied, I think it's, personally, I would say unmatched. I mean, I would always think back to my times, in undergraduate and trying to think, okay, how am I going to apply this? I'd never think I would use this. And now I'm actually going through, these classes and starting to, draw the points together and say, oh, wow, I could use this, or, hey, on the next project, I could use this, or I could actually use this method of analyses instead. So, um, starting to connect those dots, I think, is just, something that's invaluable, and you can take it to any level you can. So, that's more for the folks who I guess are thinking on applying, but still also for the folks who have maybe been accepted to kind of solidify that decision there. Um, so I mean, honestly, that's all I would say. I think it's just been a great experience, and totally think it's worth it.
Yeah. So Becca, I agree with the time management. I think that's one that I definitely wish I had a little bit more of when I started my degree. For me, it's be curious, whether you have already been admitted or you're considering applying, be curious and ask questions. There's an amazing team here in the program office, the admissions office, admissions ambassadors, and we're here to answer your questions. And it's really exciting for us to connect with students. So definitely don't feel like there's a silly question. If there's an organization or different opportunities that you're curious about, just ask the question. We love connecting with students. So I think that's all the questions I had. Solomon, thank you so much for having this conversation with me and, chatting with a few different, or chatting to the future students or prospective students. But I know that there's a few comments in the chat.
Yeah, I was trying to keep up with it. I don't know if there's any others.
Let's see.
I don't know if you guys answered okay, you answered the real world experience of your professors and the difference that makes in your learning.
And I think we answered Jenely's question with how you'd rate access to professors. I think we went over that. Sorry, I'm just catching up here. I apologize, y'all.
No worries. Awesome.
The scholarship one. Oof, wow.
Yep.
I don't want
Yeah.
to I don't want to say something that
No.
may be wrong.
Oh no, I'll answer. Yeah, I'll answer
Okay.
that, Solomon. Thank you. No worries. So there are scholarships available throughout all of the rounds when you're applying to the program. When you submit your application, you're automatically considered for merit-based scholarships, and scholarships just overall. And then also thinking about that, if even if you apply, even if it kind of goes into like a rolling admissions or something like that, scholarships are still available. So I wouldn't worry about like the money running out or anything like that. I think I've got that question before. Like, is there any money left? For the last cycle of applicants? Yes, scholarships still will be available in the final round for applications for FXO students. Thank you for that. And just
I
keep in
see.
mind, there's no separate application for that. It's just when you submit your application for the program.
See, Jenna Lee, I see or Jenna, you had a follow-on question there about can we both speak to the real world experience of the professors and the difference they make in our learning? I would say there's a ton of real world experience when my first semester, there was a professor who taught us public speaking. And she had, this long list of credentials and real world experience. So working with her was really inspiring because not only was she just like teaching us, she was kind of showing us what she used to do in her career, and still does in her career, and like explain it to us. So it was comforting to know that not only was she teaching it, but she's practicing it. And then right now I'm in a marketing class and we have a professor who has tons of real world experience. So it's definitely interesting to see her perspective on what she's teaching. This is something that she saw in her field, and now this is what, her perspective is, and so on. So Solomon, I don't know if you have anything to add to the real world experience of the professors.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I can say here is that in one of the classes I'm in right now, I think it's called analytical problem solving. It's something that I mean I'm actually going to start using in my work. I'll run into different problems where sometimes you just don't even know where to start, but the frameworks, that they provide you in this class just allow you to look at these extremely complex problems, and help break it up and identify, what's the optimal solution and the best way to get there. So, I mean, just the methods, then, tools that they give you in order to tackle some of these complex problems is, at least from this class, is something that I know that can be applied in my actual job. So, excited to get to use that.
Awesome. And then I see a question there in the chat. Are there any concentrations with the MBA program? There are no concentrations. There are many electives to choose from. However, there will be a curated list that's available online, and you can come in person for a wider range of electives if you are local to Georgetown, or if you are in the area for a while, you're a remote worker and you have, that freedom to kind of move around as you please. So no concentrations. But we do have MBA certificates as well. And as mentioned during the presentation, you can get those MBA certificates if you're able to come in person to take those courses for those specific certificates. And a question, are expenses for the global residencies covered by the program? So for the residency, I believe most likely it'll be hotel, and then you do your travel for that week for the in-person. But I know for the global business experience, I believe that we cover the hotel and the meals, and you cover your travel. Have you or anyone in the cohort done an international trek, and how was the experience?
Yeah, so I haven't done it, but I've seen pictures and I've seen group chats fly around about it, and it looks like such a fun time. I hope to do one because it seems like a great way to like get to know other students. But no, unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity quite yet.
Yes, we have ours this year. We're going to Portugal, so super excited about that.
Nice.
And I mean it sounds like it's going to be, a great week of learning and putting everything that we've learned to the test. So I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. Well, you guys don't have any other questions for Elizabeth and Solomon. This has been super insightful. I do appreciate Elizabeth and Solomon both being here. And I know like before we go into the last portion of the summit this evening, I just want to say thank you all for being here so far. And then also, even though this is the last evening of the FXO summit, it's still during Flex Week. We started off with a Flex in Flex Online application workshop on Tuesday. We did the Focus on Career panel yesterday evening. Tonight we are doing the student's point of view and the mock class. And then Saturday we have our Flex Preview Day. So if you are one of the applicants who may be potentially interested in the Flex online or the Flex in person, but you're like, I really don't know. Like, I live close to campus, but I don't know, maybe the online is more flexible for me. You know, if you're one of those applicants who are considering both programs, the Flex Preview Day is this Saturday actually. So it is definitely up on the website for you to register. It's a full day of programming. You'll be seeing, you know, deans, students, you know, being on campus, interacting with everyone, a part of the community as well. So that would be a fun event to also be a part of to finish out Flex Week with us at Georgetown. Another thing before Professor Dong joins us, I just want to go into a little information about Professor Dong as well. He has been teaching with Georgetown since I believe 2007, so he has a great long history with us at Georgetown. He's one of our esteemed faculty members at MSB. And he is also presented on many courses from um, financial accounting, strategic management, economics of strategic behavior, plus many, many more. And then he's definitely going to give you a glimpse of what it looks like to be an online student with us at Georgetown, specifically for the MBA with us. Our full-time program has 4 cohorts. Our Flex in person has 2 cohorts. Both of those programs are ranked. Our Flex Online was launched in the fall of 2022. We are working on our 3rd cohort as well. So, you know, if you're interested in applying for this cycle coming up, and you know, you'll be looking to be a part of the 3rd cohort. So this is definitely something memorable and historic. So thank you all for being here. All right. So he'll be joining us in one moment. And while we wait, if you guys have any other questions in the chat, even if it comes to like the application components, applying for the program. Yes, our next deadline is for round 3, which that deadline is April 2nd. And then the decision release date for that particular round is May 14th. So that's when you'll get your decision. And I'm the advisor for the program, so I'm definitely happy to connect outside of this. I think I dropped my email in the chat a little while ago, and I can drop it again just in case, so we can get connected and have conversations through email or even get a call scheduled so we can have a one-on-one conversation. Definitely happy to do so. And then also thinking about this particular event, you will get a app fee reduction sent to you through email. You'll complete a survey, and then also you will get a code to have a discounted application fee. So thank you so much. And Professor Arthur Dog has joined us. Thank you so much, Professor Dog. It's good to meet you. I was just telling our audience a little bit about you. I was telling them that you have been at Georgetown since about 2007, and you know, you have presented on some courses like financial accounting and strategic management. And you're one of our esteemed faculty members. So I was kind of bragging on you a bit, but it's lovely to meet you, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you so much for your kind and warm introduction. And I'd like to offer a warm hello as well as welcome to this virtual session at Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business. And so what I'm going to do next is present to you, in a sense, a kind of a free sample of a course, in a sense of what it's like to be in our classrooms and the kind of things you're going to learn. I am a professor of strategy, and as Brian has described to you, been here over 16 years, and actually I started off teaching in our part-time program, which is then called the evening program. So this program of working professionals attaining their MBA is a program that's very near and dear to my heart, and I've certainly have instructed generations of students who have come through our program over the last 16 years. But anyway, what I'd like to do today is just sort of give you talk about a topic that I think I'm trying to choose a topic that is, I think it might be familiar to all of you, and choose a company that's familiar to all of you in a way that doesn't require a prior reading or anything like that. How we do strategy here, and I'm a strategy and economics professor, is The strategy is taught in a way where it's very case-oriented, where you read cases of previous experiences of actual companies and come into the classroom to analyze and digest and unpack exactly what you're seeing in a company and trying to come to some conclusions as to whether or not the relevant strategies that were being pursued are actually, good strategies, effective strategies, or successful strategies. And so the case method is heavily used in strategy as well as in our other courses. And it really brings to life the ability for students to engage and to accelerate their learning on topics that are all related to the elevation of your knowledge of business. Strategy is important because it is for any senior level manager, sort of one of the most essential things that you have to do is to create a strategy for your organization for you to succeed in competitive markets. And the reason being is that there are very few industries in the world that don't exist in a world of competition. Very few industries operate in a market of one. And whatever the industry that you are currently in, you've got competitors. And so as a result of that, strategy matters because strategy will provide you the tools and a manner of understanding that will enable you to, in a sense, position your firm and your organization in a better way so that you come out on the right side of a strategic and competitive challenge. And so I'm going to share my screen, and I doubt very much will go more than an hour, but at least I'll give you a taste of some of the things that we talk about in my classroom. And so I'm going to share my screen here. And also, maybe we'll talk about a company that I think you all know about. So today's discussion, or tonight's discussion, is going to focus on the question of disruption, meaning that when a company is confronted with disruption, and we certainly live in a world where many industries that are traditional in our mindset are very much subject in one way or another by some upstart or some challenger that's going to fundamentally disrupt their entire business model. And so what I have on the screen here are two companies that I'm quite sure you're familiar with. Well, the one on the left is Netflix. And if I were to poll this group, I'm quite sure a very large number of you are subscribers or at least users or are familiar with Netflix. To the right, maybe depending on your age, you may or may not be familiar with that, but I don't want to, again, presume how old you are. But the company listed to the right is Blockbuster. And so both of them are engaged in entertainment and home entertainment in a sense, but both totally have different sort of approaches to the delivery of entertainment. And just starting with Blockbuster, what we know about Blockbuster is that if you recall, over a decade ago or more, we prior to the introduction of technology that allows us to stream video into our homes and watch video entertainment in our homes. Well, the traditional way of acquiring that was to go to stores like Blockbuster, meaning first that you would rent a tape, which is VHS. Again, I don't want to, sort of age you. And then it switched over to DVDs. And that's how Americans enjoyed, in a sense, movie content in their homes. They would go to a local video store such as Blockbuster, kind of peruse the shelves, look for a title that they haven't watched yet, and, pick the box off the wall and bring it to the counter and then pay for it. And so that was a very large business. Blockbuster had literally thousands of stores and locations, many of them close to where you lived in population zones. And they carried a wide variety of video content, most of which were Hollywood productions that were then converted into DVD and tape. And what we know about Blockbuster, here's their model. If I were to ask you what was the most popular day, in other words, which days were they the busiest? And I think invariably you would say, well, the days when people actually had time to watch a movie, which is the weekend. And so, of course, Friday night as well as Saturday night were the busiest times of the week for them, and the middle of the week or beginning of the week, not so much so. And so this is very much conforms to Americans and their sort of workflow. You got to have a busy week, and at the end of the week, you want to kick back and you share a movie either with a friend or your family and so on. Blockbuster carried the largest number of first-run movies versus other video stores because they understood that their consumers of home entertainment wanted to see the latest releases. In other words, a movie that was recently in the movie theaters, and then 2 or 3 months later, it is now available for home distribution via video rental. And so they carried a wide variety, a large number of copies of the latest and of the latest new releases. And that was and if a new release was not available to you, that meant then you would just like kind of cruise the aisles and look for a movie that you haven't seen before, albeit an older movie, and thereby satisfying your need. So Blockbuster itself, how they structured their business, their stores were independently owned by franchisees, meaning that those franchisees are individual families who purchased the franchise rights, meaning this is sort of like McDonald's in a sense that Blockbuster expanded by offering the opportunity to individual investors and families. If you want to run a video store, you could join our system. Certainly, there'll be costs associated with the creation and setup of a store. We will provide you marketing support and training and provide you an inventory of movies. And you don't need any experience in this business. We will train you and provide you everything you need to operate a successful video rental store. And so that's the business. I mean, it's a pretty straightforward business, not a lot of complications to it. But when you sort of examine how Blockbuster made their money, they made their money on pay-per-view. In other words, you rent it for one day and you pay a daily fee for the rental of the movie, and you are expected to return the movie the next day. But Americans, being over sort of occupied and overcommitted on the weekends, very few Americans bought that movie back the next day. And so a very significant portion of their revenues were derived from late fees, meaning that, yeah, you rented the movie on Saturday, you didn't return it on Sunday, you were too busy. And, if things went well, you return it on a Monday and sometimes even a Tuesday. In the meantime, they charge you 2 extra days, and those are late fees. So a significant portion of their profits came from late fees as a result of this model. Netflix, originated as a direct-to-consumer model. In other words, we're not operating retail stores, and we're not operating physical stores or brick-and-mortar stores. We're going to deliver entertainment into people's homes through the use of mail. And so Reed Hastings was the founder of this, and how he tested his business was he came up with an idea, and he said, I wonder if this business can be conducted in mail. So he bought a bunch of DVDs. It couldn't be done with tapes because tapes are too bulky and too expensive to ship. But when DVD discs came out, he said, let me give this a try. And he put a bunch of DVD discs addressed to his home address and dropped them off in towns and cities that surrounded his town, and just waited to see if these DVD discs would come back to him within a reasonable time and come back undamaged. And sure enough, his thoughts were validated. They not only were returned to his home pretty quickly within like 2 or 3 days, but none of them were damaged. So he went out and raised money and said, I've got a new idea. I'm going to go into the video rental business and do it via direct mail and deliver things to people's homes. So now he's off to the races. So this is a strategic example of strategic counterpositioning. In other words, Netflix examined the existing model for video rental, Blockbuster, and he said to himself, whatever they're doing, I'm going to do the opposite. So this is what we call in strategy counterpositioning, meaning offering a counter offer to consumers that's completely the opposite of what Blockbuster is offering. So the first thing we observe with Netflix, it's all you can eat. In other words, it's not pay-per-view. In other words, you're paying a movie by the day. You pay a flat fee of around $10, and you could watch all the movies you want to watch, albeit maybe 4 at a time. So you create a list in your system, in your queue. You put in order the movies you want to watch, and if the movies are available, we ship 4 at a time to you. And when you finish watching them and return them to us, we ship you the next 4. And so, point number 1, it's all you can eat, flat fee, unlimited use. Whereas Blockbuster, you pay by the day, pay per view. That's the counterposition. Counterposition number 2, we do not operate physical stores, and we're going to deliver to you. In other words, you don't have to leave your home. they will come into your mailbox delivered via U.S. Postal Service. So yes, it's not instantaneous. It does take a little bit of time for you to receive those movies. But once you receive those movies, you can keep them for as long as you want. There are no late fees. So obviously, they'd probably raise a concern if you kept them for months on end, but there's no late fees. So keep them for as long as you need until you finish watching them, and then send them back to us. And so, as a matter of convenience, Netflix does seem to me more convenient. But over time, the negative for Netflix is we just cannot carry as many of the first release titles, because that would be extraordinarily expensive for us to do. And so therefore, if you want something that is newly released, you may have to wait for it. But in addition to that, we're going to offer you a catalog of movies that Blockbuster can't satisfy, meaning we're going to provide a much wider array of movie titles, because we can go into what's known as long tail, content, meaning even the most obscure movies that Blockbuster doesn't want to carry, including foreign language films, art house films, and films from genres that are just not, standard Hollywood fare. We'll carry those titles. And the reason we carry them is because those production studios will give us those movies at a much more discounted basis. And so as a result, they have a pretty wide catalog of content to offer, including some very obscure content, as well as historical films and old films. And really, when you sort of, look at the differences between the Netflix customer and the Blockbuster customer, you come to the understanding that the Blockbuster customer is more impulsive, that they're looking to satisfy an immediate need. In other words, whatever sort of attracts my fancy on that particular night or that day, that's the movie I'm going to grab. But Netflix, you have a much more deliberate, maybe a film, enjoyer, people that have probably a deep interest in film as an art form, and really have a deep interest in even looking at historically old films from the sort of golden era, even black and white films, and films that come from more obscure producers, and as well as foreign countries. So you've got a much more dedicated, in a sense, dedicated to the art form, and really like to, have the time and the interest to see a lot of content and do it very inexpensively, or, in terms of the price point being very attractive to the average consumer. And so over time, Netflix starts to build a pretty substantial following through their DVD by mail business. And Blockbuster has every opportunity. They're confronted with a disruptor. And Blockbuster had every opportunity to either adjust their game plan, adjust their strategy, and confront the challenge that they were facing with Netflix. Let's bear in mind and assume that the people that are running Blockbuster are neither ignorant, stupid, or dumb. In other words, they knew full well and are watching Netflix very carefully. So this is just an object lesson in what happens when you think about the history of disruption. It's not a pretty one. When industries and companies are confronted with disruptive impact from rival companies, especially with the change in technology, the research in this area indicates that the record of response to disruptive activity within their industry is pretty dismal. Meaning the vast majority of companies, when confronted with disruption, either do not respond or respond so weakly that ultimately they wind up being, in a sense, eliminated from the marketplace. And this is exactly what happened to Blockbuster. And so what happened to Blockbuster is, and this falls within, in a sense, it's very observable behavior. They knew that Netflix presented an existential challenge, meaning their very existence was going to be challenged as a result of the rise of Netflix. Yet Blockbuster could not do anything to respond. Blockbuster easily could have created Blockbuster.com, copied Netflix, and got into the DVD by mail business, but they refused to do that. And why so? So the economic and strategic observation is, when you're confronted with disruption, companies oftentimes cannot make changes because of what economists describe as path dependency. In other words, your business is structured in such a way that it really narrows the path upon which you can operate and restrict your ability to deviate from that path. In other words, Blockbuster knew that the challenge could be, is not only threatening, but could completely undermine their business model. Yet they refused to make the change. And this is what economists observe, that you're on a certain path, you are now dependent on that path, and you cannot stray from that path. And so what was Blockbuster's path dependency? Number one, pay-per-view. We make our money by charging per view, and we make our money by charging late fees. If we go to a flat fee, all you can eat model, our profit model disappears. So that's, path dependency number one. Path dependency number two, if we go to blockbuster.com, how are the 4,000 or more Blockbuster franchisees going to feel about that? They have, in a sense, invested their life savings in a Blockbuster store, and that is their only source of income. And if we do a blockbuster.com and we start, renting movies to consumers via mail order, what are their stores going to look like? Well, they're likely going to start looking empty. So path dependency number two was a very powerful one. If we do a sort of direct delivery model, we will completely undermine and undercut our existing franchisees. And not only will that provoke lawsuits, but they will abandon us in droves and our entire model will collapse. And so in number three, we are focused on delivering, the latest and greatest in home entertainment, which is new releases. We cannot go into a model where we're buying all old films and buying films that people don't really want to watch on a more frequent basis. That will also bankrupt us. And so for all those reasons, the manner in which Blockbuster built its business created a straitjacket upon which they could not make the change. And eventually, once Netflix went, as technology improved, broadband internet came online, and now you can actually stream movies instantaneously. Netflix decided to make the transition. We're no longer going to do DVD by mail. We're completely switching to an online platform where you pay one fee and you can get whatever content on our site is available, and you can get it instantaneously. The big challenge, and then by that point, it's game over. Blockbuster never made the transition, never responded. Netflix's counterposition strategy worked extremely well, and then it was game over for Blockbuster. And I think you can all acknowledge that there are no more Blockbusters around. Every single one of them closed. But for one, which I heard, there's only one left, and I heard it's someplace in the state of Oregon. But other than that, you don't see Blockbuster around anymore. They've completely eliminated from the marketplace, which is, again, this is a cautionary tale of what can happen and what will happen when you're confronted with a disruptive change. But the history tells us time and time again that when confronted with disruption, very few incumbent companies ever make the switch and ever make the change that will enable them to both comprehend and also appropriately adjust their strategy to stay relevant when change is happening at a very rapid pace. So Netflix is now fully online, fully streaming, which gives consumers instantaneous access to their content and able to stream on every device, from phones to tablets to full screen TVs in the comfort of your living room. And so now they have about 350 million subscribers. It's worldwide because they have content that cuts across cultures and cuts across different languages. Their international subscriber base is quite large. And one of the big problems that Netflix has confronted of late is that under intellectual property laws, Hollywood can charge Netflix on a pay-per-view basis. In other words, if 100 million people watch a Hollywood film, Netflix will now owe them 100 million fees, for the use of that film. Whereas in DVD, all you have to do is buy the DVD, but you do not owe Hollywood studios any additional money once you purchase the DVD, and you could show it as many times as possible. So Netflix confronted a huge sort of cost, a cost condition that would cripple them if they had to pay a pay per fee per viewing to Hollywood studios. And so their answer was, well, if we can't pay it, we might as well make our own content. And that's exactly what Netflix does. So they have the ability to invest $100 million into a Netflix series. They created their own studio called Red Envelope Studios. They hired a Hollywood veteran named Ted Sarandos, and they went out and created their own content. And in other words, serialized content with multiple episodes that have become, for many of you, certainly highly imaginative and very, very addictive. And so whether it's House of Cards or any of the, Bridgerton or any of the more recent popular series that Netflix produces, they are now a full-fledged Hollywood studio because they have the ability to spend $100 million, but spread that cost over 350 million customers, thereby reducing their dependency on Hollywood for content. But they also go to independent filmmakers and say to independent filmmakers who don't have exposure or don't have distribution deals with Hollywood studios, give me your content and I'll get a big audience for you. And so they're more than happy to provide Netflix content at a discounted price because many of these producers and directors and actors want exposure. And so once they get exposure, then they could sort of get bigger and bigger, and their work can be seen by more people, and then leading to more opportunities to make films in the future. So that's the Netflix story, but we still have a lot more to go. So let me sort of, exit from this, and let's continue our discussion of disruption, and then sort of give you maybe a firmer understanding of the economics of disruption. I'm going to cite one more example of disruption to make this very clear, and then we'll finish our discussion tonight and we'll let you go. And so here is an example again of disruption. You've got two of these machines. To the top left is a steam shovel. It's called a steam-powered shovel, and the bottom right is a hydraulic excavator. Well, the machine on the upper left was invented like in the mid-19th century, like 1850, 1860. It's a machine that's powered by a steam engine, and you could see that the shovel is quite large. And what makes that shovel dig out, dirt is a bunch of pulleys and cables. And you could see the cables, that are being attached to a bunch of wheels that, again, the steam engine, sort of propels and activates. This was the state of the excavating industry well into around the World War II period, meaning this is the technology that existed for about 100 years. These machines are large and they're powerful, and they could scoop out a pretty large amount of dirt and soil in one scoop. Their primary customers were mining companies and general excavators, which needed two things. They needed like a large bucket, meaning you could remove a large quantity of soil in one scoop, but they also needed a very large arm so you can dig deep and make a really big hole. So so this was state of the art, and there were about 30 companies in America that made these types of machines. And they were, popular, and they were in widespread use in construction and road building and things like that. Well, right after World War II came a company called JCB, and JCB is just the initials for John C. Bamford. It's a British company based in UK. He's an engineer, and he said, I've got a better idea. He said, pulleys and cables are very unreliable. And, even though those cables are made out of steel, they're braided steel, they eventually will break and stretch, which means these machines on the upper left require a lot more maintenance, and they're prone to failure. So he comes up with a new idea. We can make these machines smaller, more portable. We can, instead of using pulleys and cables, we use hydraulic mechanisms driven by hydraulic pumps. And the engine is not a steam engine, but a modern diesel engine, which is much smaller. And in terms of size to power, much more powerful in terms of size, and runs on diesel fuel rather than like, some kind of heating source like coal, and the necessary of having water stored in it to boil steam. So he said, I've got a better idea. And so he introduces his hydraulic excavator. And actually, these steam shovel companies, they understood what JCB was doing, and they made a few prototypes of their own. In other words, they actually copied some of these models, and they made a few prototypes, and they showed these machines to their main customers, which were mining companies and of the like. And they asked their customers, could you use a machine like this new technology? And one after the other, every customer said, no, we can't use machines like this. We're not interested in buying this because, number one, the bucket size is too small. Number two, the arm reach is not long enough. So therefore, we don't have a use for this. And so all 35 of these steam shovel machine companies, they understood the technology. It wasn't like that difficult a technology to copy because this is pure engineering science. And time again, they introduced it to their customers, and the customer says, we can't use this. And so JCB said, okay, if I can't find a market with traditional customers, I'm going to do a counter offer or a counter position. This is World War II. World War II is now over. And what happens not only in America, but rest of the civilized world, in America, we experience a housing boom. America now is out of war. All the soldiers return from war. They get married in large numbers. They come through a national trauma, a global trauma, the likes of which the world has never experienced before. Many of them have gone through the shock of war and now want to restore some normalcy in their lives by, in a sense, establishing themselves and building a family, restoring some normality to their lives, and going out into the suburbs to build homes and get a home. And so what JCB said is, yeah, if the miners don't want my machine, I'm going to find a market that wants them. He introduces his machine to home builders, and he rolls the machine onto, the home builder lots and says, could you guys use this? And the home builders said, heck yeah, this is the perfect machine for us. Where have you been? Thank God you made this machine. And the reason being is this. As homes were being produced in suburban communities all over America, the homes are spaced very close together. If you use a large machine, you risk damaging or even running into a home. You not only that, but you risk tearing up the lawn and disturbing the lawn and this sort of, the home site. So we can't have a large machine. And this machine is smaller. It's maneuverable. He can get between homes without damaging it. The controller or the operator can steer this thing easily. And we don't care if it has a big bucket because the only thing we need to trench is we need to trench a narrow and shallow trench to bring water lines, sewer lines, and electrical lines into the home. So we don't need a machine that has a long reach, and we don't need a machine that has a huge bucket. And so in time, this is exactly what happens in time. JCP finds a market, and now they're established into the market. And now the revolution, they're a disruptor. JCP will single-handedly start to disrupt the entire steam shovel business. Not a single steam shovel company adopted hydraulic technology. And so what JCB does is this. This is the metaphor. What goes up can't go down. So the existing steam shovel companies refuse to go the down escalator. They refuse to ride it down. And that's just a metaphor for saying that we refuse to go down market. We will not sell lighter, smaller, and obviously less expensive machines. That's not our business. We refuse to do that. If we're going to compete, we only go higher, bigger and more capable machines that give us a higher price. We're never going to ride down. JCB, the challengers will always ride down. In other words, they will look at the incumbent, and the best strategy for a challenger is let's ride the escalator down. In other words, we go down market because we know the existing incumbents will never go down market. So we go down market into a smaller machine. We're going to find a market with a smaller machine that's obviously also a cheaper machine. Once we establish ourselves, what do challengers do? they start to ride up. In other words, you will always notice that challengers will ride down market, hit the ground floor with a lower performing machine that comes in at a lower price. And what do next? They start making investments in technology and improving their product so they can improve the product performance and get higher price. So they ride the escalator down metaphorically, hit the ground floor, then they start riding it up. And this is exactly what JCB did. They introduced small machines, but what did they do next? Started introducing bigger machines with bigger buckets and bigger claws and longer arms. And in time, they developed machines that were not only bigger than steam shovels, more capable, more efficient, but more efficiently priced. Within a matter of years, not a single of the 30 steam shovel companies adopted this technology. Every single one of them went out of business because of their failure. And what was that failure? The exact same observation we made with Blockbuster. It's called path dependency. In other words, they created their own path. They wouldn't deviate from their existing path. They could not see selling smaller machines at smaller prices. They only want to ride the up escalator. If we're going to make improvements, we want to increase the performance, and in so doing, get higher prices. So that's the lesson, object history in this, and we're going to finalize with one more observation. So if the attack comes, and this depiction here is just another metaphorical and illustrative depiction, for incumbent companies that are confronting disruptors, the attack will always come from below. In other words, somebody underneath you is going to come under you at a lower price point with a lower performing product, and they're going to eat you alive. And so from a strategic point of view, historically speaking, this happens a lot. And so one of the great observations, so if you're a challenger, here's your best strategy. If you're going to take on and disrupt an existing industry and take on, somebody that's much larger than you, and you want to disrupt, this is how you do it. So strategy not only works for the incumbent, but strategy also works for the challenger. And so the observation, and here are a bunch of brand names. Some of these are very familiar to you. So I'm just going to look at two brand names to start off with, Toomey and Away. And if I were to ask you what Toomey makes, many of you are familiar with this brand. They make high-end, high-performing luggage. They're found in shopping malls. They have an online opportunity. Their 24-inch carry-on bag, well-made, well-designed, starts at about $650. There's a luggage company called Away. In other words, an Away 24-inch luggage cost $250. It's got the same functionality as a Toomey. And when I go to the airports, it seems to me everybody has an Away luggage. So how you attack an incumbent, in other words, you're a challenger, you always have to sort of follow what's known as the consumer, and this is known as the, consumer or the product life cycle. When consumers evaluate products, their mindset goes along this sort of product life cycle. So no matter what it is you're considering buying, the first thing you're going to think about is functionality. And so this is well documented in the research. In other words, consumers, they think about the function of this first. And if it's luggage, what do I want this piece of luggage to do? I want it to carry 24, I want it to be 24 inches so it fits in a overhead bin. I want it to have nice rolling wheels. I want it to have aluminum handle that pops out so I can push this thing around airports. And I want it to have nice compartments and a really secure zipper and lock. So the first thing is functionality. So what Away does is they look at Toomey, they copy all the functions and say, we're going to match them feature for feature and function for function. In addition to that, we're going to give you more functions. In other words, an Away 24-inch bag, roll-away has a battery charger. In other words, you can charge your iPhone should you run out of energy. So it's an additional feature that Toomey doesn't have. The next thing consumers think about is reliability. How reliable is this item? If it's not going to be reliable, even though the price is lower, I'm not going to buy it. So Away, what is their guarantee? They understand the product life cycle. So to take away the risk from the consumer, they provide a lifetime guarantee. In other words, if any component of this luggage breaks, send it back to us. We will either repair it or give you a new one. So we're going to give you 100% reliability. We're going to back that up. Number 3, convenience. Well, you can pretty much find a Tumi at any of their stores, and they're pretty widely distributed. You can go to tumi.com as well. Away doesn't use physical stores. They say this is a straight online business. We will have that luggage delivered to you via UPS within 4 days. So in terms of convenience, it doesn't get much more convenient than that. In other words, you don't have to, sort of even, lift yourself out of your home. You could do it from your phone or do it online and order an Away luggage, and it's there in front of your home within days. And in terms of price, they understand that's the last stage of the product life cycle. We are going to slaughter Tumi on price. We're going to come in at $250. Tumi charges $650. And so this is repeated over and over again. And where did this work? So our final observation is if you're going to challenge and be a disruptor, always look for opportunities in industries where there's over delivery of performance. That's where there's going to be the greatest opportunity. So you name the product, you name the service. In any given moment, there is in the marketplace this perception that some companies are oversupplying performance. In other words, yeah, Tumi is really nice, but could it be that perhaps they're overperforming in some way? In other words, there's consumers that would look at that performance and say, do I really need all those bells and whistles? Could something that's a little less expensive be an equal substitute? And so for challengers, that's the model. Understand if you identify over delivery of performance, you have just identified opportunity. And so here are some examples of over delivery performance. In the sort of lodging or hotel business, there are a lot of consumers that say, I don't need all the bells and whistles of a Marriott hotel or a Hyatt hotel. I don't need all that. I don't need 24-hour room service. I don't need all the amenities and sort of the meal and the food and beverage opportunities of a hotel. I just need a decent room, well located, that's safe and clean, and that's self-catering. In other words, if I want to drink something, I'll go out, to a local bar or to a 7-Eleven and buy something to eat and drink. And thus Airbnb comes to life because they understand that the typical hotel chains might be over-delivering and oversupplying performance, and there might be a segment of the population that doesn't want to pay for all of that. And so they meet the functionality, although they will not have 24-hour room service and some of those functions that only a hotel can deliver. They're going to be reliable because of the ratings and the sort of guarantees they provide to their consumers. They're certainly convenient because you can reserve a Airbnb room from the comfort of your home, and they're definitely going to beat you on price, meaning they're, in a proper location, their pricing is going to be, less than what a hotel is pricing. Not always the case, because I hear in some locations, Airbnbs are becoming as expensive as hotels. So even in the sort of service industry of hospitality, you're seeing companies observe that there's over delivery of performance, thus coming up with Airbnb. Dollar Shave Club, does everybody really need a Gillette Mach 5 with 5 blades? Will 3 blades sufficiently shave my face and my legs? Of course it will. And so Dollar Shave and those sort of, discount shave operators match the functionality. It's going to be reliable. You can order it from online, so it's convenient, and they're going to kill you on price. It's going to be substantially lower for the blades, at least, than the blades that are. And by the way, I don't know if you've bought Gillette blades lately. At CVS, they lock them up because it's 4 blades for like $24. So it's pretty expensive for the number of blades you get. But you go to Dollar Shave Club, it's much less money, meaning Dollar Shave understands that the rest of the world doesn't need 5 blades. 3 blades will do the job. They're over delivering performance, and I'll be able to meet and generate business at a much lower price. H&M, does the world need designer clothes? H&M is just an answer to that. No, the world doesn't need designer clothes. In other words, there's a lot of over delivery of performance, and people just need basic clothes that are well made, as well decently styled. And so all of these sort of fast fashion companies like H&M understand this trajectory. They do this exactly. They can find a marketplace because people, will look at the functionality of their clothes versus more higher priced clothes. They know H&M is reliable. They know they're conveniently located where the stores, as well as their online business, and they're definitely going to get you on price. And so time and time again, you see this, and I'll leave it with the automotive example. South Korean companies understand this model. They understand it really well. I mean, 10 years ago, you never heard of a company called Hyundai and Kia. Today, Hyundai and Kia are taking on the likes of Toyota and Honda. They have accelerated to become one of the best-selling vehicles in America. And how did the South Korean manufacturers do this? They followed this model. They said, perhaps these companies, the incumbent companies like Toyota and Honda, we can match their function. So we're going to come in with a Hyundai car. We're going to match all the functions, and their target car is like a Toyota Camry. We're going to match all the functions that a Toyota Camry can deliver, and we're going to add more features than Toyota offers. Secondly, we're reliable. And so to take away that equation from consumers, Hyundai has the strongest warranty in the automotive world. They give you 100,000 miles or like 10 years. Most automotive warranties are 12,000 miles in 1 year. So they're backing up their cars. In other words, if you have a problem, bring it back, we will fix it. And we're going to fix it for 100,000 miles. So they take away any sort of risk from the consumer by informing the consumers our cars are super reliable. Second, convenience. We're going to build out an extensive dealer network that carries our cars, making it very easy for consumers to buy our cars. And finally, price. Hyundai and Kia are very successful because they match all the functionality, reliability, and convenience of Toyota, but they're going to give their vehicles at, I think, $2,000 on average less than the equivalent SUV or car that Toyota is making. Thus, if you look around the sort of automotive landscape, you're seeing a lot of Hyundais and Kias now because they understand this model. There's a degree of overperformance. And so long as we understand this model, we go down market first, take the escalator down, sell an inexpensive entry-level car, and then we start riding the escalator up, building better, more extensive, bigger SUVs, even now luxury cars. And so that's the model. Take the escalator down, hit the ground floor with an entry-level cheap car, then start making investments in improving your car so you can go up the escalator with higher performance and higher price. Folks, you've been a terrific and patient group. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope you enjoyed our mini lesson on disruption. This is the kind of stuff you're going to see here in the MSB classroom, and this is the kind of stuff I think we do well. So I want to thank you all. I welcome the opportunity. If you have any questions about this program, feel free to reach out to me at any time. But I encourage you all to take a good look at our program, as I know you're looking at other programs. But there are certain advantages, that our program has that other programs don't. So thank you, Brian, and I wish you all a wonderful evening.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor Dong. It was such a pleasure to sit in on your class. If you guys have any quick questions while we still have Professor Dong, go ahead and drop those in the chat. But just to say thank you again, Professor Dong. I learned a little bit myself. I remember I grew up on Blockbuster. I'm a millennial, and I remember going to Blockbuster, growing up with my grandparents, and we went and rented movies and had to return them, and we got more. So it was definitely a fun experience. So maybe I'll try to visit that one that's left in Oregon. So
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. But if you guys, oh yeah, you're welcome. They were saying thank you, Professor Dong. If you guys do not have any questions for us, we'll go ahead and wrap up, the last evening of the Flex MBA Online Summit. Now, don't forget that I did mention that the Flex Preview Day is this Saturday. So if you're interested in the Flex Online or the Flex MBA in person, and you are local and able to come in person this Saturday, please register. It's on our events website. Definitely happy to provide more information. Also, I'm going to drop my email again and also a link for you all to schedule a conversation with an admissions advisor, especially if you have further questions or just want to have a deeper conversation. We all be happy to connect. So I'm gonna drop my email and then also the link to schedule a call with an advisor. Thank you guys so much for being with us this evening. You could have been anywhere else, but you were here listening into us. But thank you so much. Have a safe evening, and thank you again, Professor Dong. And I hope I get to connect with you all further. Have a good one.
Have a wonderful evening, folks. I'll turn it back over to you. I'm getting out of this, so have a wonderful evening and best wishes on your educational journey.
Thank you, Professor Dong. All right, thank you to my audience. I hope to speak with you all soon and have a good and safe night. Bye.